it had got to a point where I'd been running this business for like 8 years. We'd raised a whole lot of cash. We had over time raised like £3 million. The team grew to 14 at one point. And through COVID, obviously being an e-commerce business, everyone's at home buying frying pans, brilliant. But over time, the mechanics of the business changed, and we just weren't getting enough revenue in to cover our costs. And the point that I spoke to you at, we were facing not being able to raise any more capital and running out of money at an alarming rate. And I couldn't really figure out what my choices were at that point. I think that was part of the issue. I had so many competing thoughts and ideas in my head, and the idea of letting that mission go was abhorrent to me. And at the same time, I felt this huge responsibility for shareholders. I also knew that, the stress I was putting my family through wasn't great at that point, but I couldn't see through the mess to figure out what to do. I realized at the end of that conversation that the only choice was, if I was serious about fulfilling that mission, which is the clarity you gave me, was to let go of everyone in my company. Wow. And run the entire business myself, which is what I then did that day. I had a meeting and I said, look, everyone, this isn't what I would have chosen, but the choice is either the business closes completely and I lose everything, or I let everyone go, stop paying myself pretty much, and just try and build again from the ground up something that can support itself. And so obviously that was a huge decision, and then the practicalities of that kicked in, and that was pretty big as well.
Wow. So that is a huge moment and a huge change.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that I think the choice probably would have been taken away, wouldn't it? It's like that. Sometimes we tell ourselves that there is a choice, and there is a choice unless we don't make it, and not making a choice is still a choice.
Yeah. And that was what I had been doing for, the months before that, or not quite seeing what the choices were that I had to make. And so that moment of having that clarity, changed everything. And I'm, so grateful that I did that, because, it's been incredibly difficult. However, the team, being these amazing people that they were completely supportive. They knew that if I could have kept them, I would have done. And so there was no sense of resentment or, churlishness. They were like, how can we help? How can we help make this okay for you to run the business completely single-handedly? And they taught me everything that they did. And they put in systems and culled things to make it work.
Because I think this is really a fascinating sort of thing to dive into, because you took a business with sort of 14 people and took it down to yourself. And now a lot of people look at that business and go, oh, there's no there's no everyone's needed, everyone's necessary, and we really focus on scaling, and this idea of when to downsize feels almost like a step back or a mistake or a failure.
Yeah.
But I think really interesting to dive into how you did this. Because if you can take from 14 to 1, what allowed you to do that?
Spreadsheets. You think I'm joking? No, I built a spreadsheet, and I got everyone to write down every single task that they did. Whether it was daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, how much time it took them, and how needed it was. I also then, went through and I was like, well, these are the completely business critical operations that have to happen, whether it's daily or weekly. Without this, the business will crumble. If the customers stop getting their products, if the suppliers stop getting paid, if customers stop being replied to, very soon you have 1-star Trustpilot reviews saying you're a scam. Very soon you'd have suppliers pulling out, and very soon, obviously if you don't send a product, you'd probably be facing some sort of legal action. So those were the things that I had to solve first. And so I very quickly went about building automations, essentially robots that could replicate those tasks.
But before we jump into the automation, that's a fascinating process. Fascinating might not be the right word, but for that spreadsheet, I'm curious, like, having done that, what percentage of the tasks do you reckon you were left with as critical? Because often we build businesses, they morph into like more and more actions and projects and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, like, what percentage of those things were you left with when you had to cut it down?
I'm picturing the spreadsheet now. I think it was surprisingly fewer than I thought. But I'd like to caveat that in that these were the operations without which the business might begin to fail within a couple of weeks. Then there was the kind of second tier where if I didn't do any of this, the business would just die a very slow death because no marketing emails are being sent out, no social media is being sent out, no new products are being put on the site, so you might not die immediately, but it would be a slow death over months. So I dealt with the first tier first, and then I had to kind of work on the second tier. But it did surprise me going through the whole list, being like, nope. Yeah, it was surprising. Yeah.
So gut feel, let's say, the first list die in 2 weeks.
That was about maybe 10%.
And then the sort of the slow death pile?
The slow death pile was probably another... That was more like 40 to 50%. That was quite substantial stuff, but it didn't all have to happen at once. It was like some things might mitigate other things, but they would still be in that pile as long as enough of that stuff was happening. Then you'd probably mitigate like degrowth, if that makes sense.
So kind of you could roughly half what was being done before.
Yeah.
That still takes you down to about 7 people, let's say. Then you've got to make yourself 10 people. So yeah, sounds like automation was the route that you chose.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to make, is that if we had had that conversation a year earlier than that, so we had it in March 2024, if it had been March 2023, I don't think my choices would have been the same. And that's because of AI and automation and what it allows you to do. When I realised that AI can code for you, and essentially the ability to code means that you can build yourself little apps and automations that can essentially do anything as long as it's in a digital form. And obviously we're a digital site. That opened the doorway to me believing that this was possible.
But OpenAI hadn't, 'cause I remember this conversation, I remember sort of the trigger. Now it's kind of like a taken as read thing that you can do this stuff. OpenAI wasn't talked about when and I know it's more than OpenAI this, but like it feels like you were ahead of the curve on this because it hadn't really hit public consciousness in the same way that it has now.
Yes, I think that's true. I think I'd just begun, I think maybe even in like the couple of weeks before we talked, to try and figure out solutions and to try and figure out what was possible. And I was only just beginning to scrape the surface, but I'd seen a couple of YouTube videos that had slightly blown my mind in terms of the automation space. And that had kind of sent my brain into a kind of like, oh, if that's possible, then this could be possible. And if that's possible, then that could be possible. And that, I think, gave me the courage to take the plunge. Otherwise, I think if it had been a choice between closing the business and running everything myself manually, it wouldn't have been the same choice. Nowhere close.
So you've got then this sort of 7 person worth of tasks. You start with how do you, for other people that maybe you think about doing this, you've got your spreadsheet. You've got your task. What now?
So I went through the list. So the first thing was inventory, I think. So if products are out of stock with with a brand, but we don't know that they're out of stock, then we're selling products that don't exist, which is obviously going to very quickly start to cause some issues. And so trying to build something that would take our inventory and automate it to the point where I didn't have to touch it was probably one of the biggest challenges. The way that we received inventory from our brands was in such a weird and wonderful variety of ways, from somebody sending a spreadsheet, someone sending a CSV, someone just sending an email saying, hey, we've only got 2 of these left. So, but it was generally all through email. So I built an email scraper for the brands that sent inventory in that way, which allowed it to scrape my email, take all of the information, no matter what format it was in, and put it into a Google Sheet that then normalized it against all of the products we have. And then as soon as that was done, we had the correct information. And then I used make.com to automate that spreadsheet to take any change in inventory directly into Shopify. So that took, I want to say, a week and a half to build. And it was very frustrating because I can't code at all. So I would get ChatGPT to write the code and it would half do it. But then there would be errors, and the process was write the code. It would write the code, I'd copy and paste it, run it. It would half do something, but probably error out, and then I'm copy and pasting the errors back into ChatGPT and saying it's doing this. And then it'd be like, I will rewrite the code for you. And then it would, and then I'd paste it back, and it was this. And sometimes what would happen is that it would do something perfectly, but then there'd be another error, and then I'd paste it back, and then it would stop doing the thing perfectly. And that was the most frustrating thing, is because I can't code, so I have no idea what's changed, and I'm, completely reliant on it doing the right thing. And, it wasn't an easy process. It was quite addictive, I would say, because you never knew which, the moment that it worked, it felt like magic. It was like, when I could see like all of the spreadsheets and all of the data coming in perfectly and pinging into Shopify, and I'm like, I never have to do this manually again. That moment, it feels like a miracle.
You're having this time pressure looming over you of like just the doing, and then you've got to commit all this time to plan and design and go through this process.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot.
It was insane. I was working 14, 16 hour days. I lost all the skin on my fingers. I had to wear gaming gloves because I was on my laptop so much. I lost about 1.5 stones. So all the baby weight was gone. So that was quite handy, but not in a healthy way. It was bad. I don't want to sugarcoat it and say like, oh, I'm, got rid of all my stuff and, I have robots from my company and it's all hunky dory. It was incredibly painful and a lot of work. The breakthroughs and the victories when they happened were spectacular and gave me the strength to carry on doing it. But it wasn't without sacrifice. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so sleep was at a minimum, and it was a big pressure on the whole family. And balancing there was no balance, and I think I had to be okay with that. And I had to make sure that my partner was okay with it too. And luckily, he realized he had to be and was actually incredibly supportive and let me have no balance for the first couple of months at the very least. Yeah.
So you've taken sort of the company back. It's been super stressful. It's like you had these sort of euphoric wins amongst sort of no sleep and long hours and sort of the consequences of this. But are you seeing at this stage, are you starting to see the business impact of these changes?
Well, what was interesting is that it took a really long time to see any sort of impact because, as you say, I was spending so much of my time just trying to build the mechanisms that were going to allow me to run it by myself, that a lot of balls were being dropped. So that 40% of the things that would grow the business weren't really happening. And, you know, so throughout the whole of the summer, so the last member of staff left in June, and running the business myself, June, July, August, it was kind of under or hovering around the point where it needed to be to break even after losing all of the staff. And I remember October particularly. September was kind of okay, and then October was really bad for sales. And in October I was like, you know what, I'm not sure this is going to work because, you know, I have stripped this company down to the bare bones. I got rid of so many apps. I got so, like, every cost I had looked at, and I was like left with what, like, insurance and the Shopify, you know, app itself. You know, I was like, and I'm barely paying myself, so I was like, I don't think I can strip it back anymore, and we're still not breaking even. And then the one thing I had managed to keep going in all of that time is to plan the Christmas sales and all of that. And as soon as I turned those on in November, things went completely bananas, and the sales absolutely shot up. I ran a really good Black Friday campaign, and it completely flabbergasted me because Q4 2024 was up on Q4 2023 when I had all of those staff members.
Wow.
In terms of revenue.
Wow.
And we made a profit for the first time ever. And that was such a huge moment and just made me so happy. Just to know that the business was capable of supporting itself, just felt really huge, and was a moment of real pride. I was still working crazy hours, so then the challenge became a different one, I think, at the beginning of the year, and it's still one I'm working through. So it's like, can the business grow and do well without me killing myself? And I think the answer is yes, but it needs more of that automation work to build more than just the stuff that's going to keep the business ticking along. It's now much more nuanced and actually much more complex automations that are needed, the ones that are going to really get the marketing side humming and get new products on the site and all of that. And while that work has begun, there's more to do.
I think for sort of founders listening, if it's like you took this decision, we talked about being like almost at the last moment possible. Like if you hadn't taken it, we took it, there wouldn't have been a runway.
Agreed.
If you'd taken it maybe 3 months, 6 months earlier, you maybe couldn't have done because AI didn't exist in the same form. But let's say you were in that position today, and our founders thinking about, okay, I've got a team of 14, 20, 25, like they're in the scale up phase. And there's this sense of, okay, am I scaling with adding more people in? Do I take the time to like think about automation? How would you do it? What would be your message to other founders if they were thinking about exploring this path?
don't underestimate the power of having people. I miss my people desperately. And I really wish I still had my team.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is so much you can do. And if those team members, as well as the founder, aren't looking into ways of increasing their productivity and, automating the things that computers are just great at, I just feel like let the computers do the things that computers are good at. So taking data from one place, processing it in some way and putting it into another place, that's a computer's job. That shouldn't be any human's job. It's boring, right? So I'm like, let AI take care of any and all of that immediately. And what you'll find is that, that frees up time for your team. And I don't want to come in and be like, yeah, fire all your staff. It's great, because that's not the case. But there is so much that you can do. And, the rate of progress, even since I started doing this, is immense. And the power of AI agents now, I just started building my own agents, which is slightly different from automations. And what they can do is insane. And I think the rate of how good they are is doubling every month.
Wow.
I mean, it's insane. So I think that every founder will see cost savings, efficiency savings. Like if you can keep your team but just scale much faster and more efficiently with AI. If you can't keep your team, then there are options for you, I guess is what I'm saying.
Because you did it in probably the most extreme way possible, which is like sort of at the last minute, all team, all automation.
Yeah.
So it feels like if you can do it earlier, better.
Yes.
But it sounds like even if you're doing it earlier, it still can be disruptive. Even if you've got the whole team on board.
Yeah.
This process of sort of conflict almost between like doing the day-to-day well and spending time, assigning time to automate, to think it through. It feels like quite a big piece of work. So I was wondering.
That's the hardest thing, and it's probably my biggest challenge currently is that there are things I still want to build. I have a list of Post-its on my wall of automations that I want to build, and I'm kind of quietly confident that once that list is built, that I'll have a semi-self-running business. However, each one takes a couple of weeks and I still have to do everything else at the same time. So I would say that, it is about eking out that time. And it might be a question of being like, right, this is the automation that we're going to work on next. And this is the time we're going to allocate to it. And it's going to take time out of the everyday and something else might have to be dropped to make it happen. But it's about thinking forward to that, well, now we never have to do this again. And how much time saving does that take out of our week? And then how much more can we do with that time? So every automation takes you closer to being able to do more with less.
Because a lot of founders go, it's not, I'm not technical, as you said, you weren't either. It's like, it's not necessarily my thing. But it sounds like you really feel this as a founder's sort of, almost a key part of a founder's role now, to start making the time to explicitly allow team to take the time to think about how you can scale smarter with AI.
I do think that if a founder isn't thinking about that, they're losing out massively, because there will be other founders in their space who are, and it will allow them to scale faster and cheaper. So, and then they'll be able to undercut them.
And if you were to give like sort of a percentage of time that you'd allow for team, or even for themselves to go day to day AI, would you almost, sounds like you almost would ring fence some time?
Definitely.
What percentage of time would you think you'd ring fence?
I would say it depends on what that person's role is, and how technical perhaps they are. If for example, I had a finance person and they were strategic, it would be about kind of trying to download their strategic thinking and their assumptions and the way that they think about money and how they manipulate it with their current tools to try and understand whether AI can take anything kind of manual or processing off their plate to give them more instantaneous insights, more instantaneous answers. So that, it could be just a question of a couple of hours of deep interviewing of your CFO to try and really understand how they think about the money in your company and what would make their life quicker. So it might be that person doesn't need to ring fence any huge amount of time and start building automations in their spare time, but then it might be that another member of staff, say for example a researcher who's finding products to add onto the site, maybe they're the one that both show the interest and ability to figure out ways to get AI to help them and actually start to build the automations or agents that can go out into the world and do that scraping and research for them to get the data to a stage where then that researcher takes those final steps to say, yes, this is a product that we want to bring on the site. And so then maybe that's a question of saying like, right, okay, so I now want you to, and I will help you to do it. I want you to watch these YouTube videos and I want you to build something that will do that. And then maybe say, look, I want you to ring fence 20 to 30% of your day on to do this. And actually that could be quite significant, if not more, because if there aren't lots of new products being added to the site all the time, that's not necessarily going to make the business slow down significantly. But if they build an automation that can speed up the onboarding of products by 10 times, then that's incredibly significant.
It sounds like part of this is you've got, as a founder, you don't know what you don't know.
Of course. And
like going back to this time, you were ahead of the game because you were interested in it. If a founder was looking at this now, where would you suggest they go to start getting their knowledge and raising it up?
So I listen to the AI Daily Brief every day. It gives you the latest insights in AI. I follow a lot of AI podcasts, and actually some of them are super fun. And what they'll do is they'll break down every time there's a new innovation in AI. You'll have people like live checking them out, showing you what they can do in your space. So, AI for marketing podcasts, AI for e-commerce podcasts, and they'll show you what's possible. On top of that, I would encourage everyone to look into either make.com, which is what I use, or Zapier, which is an automation platform. And that just allows the big bits of tech in your life to talk to each other. And for me, it still feels like magic because I built my own fitness app with it because it was fun, and it's all just run off a spreadsheet. I put in what my fitness level was now and what I want it to be. And I'm a massive geek. So I created like 90 levels. And they're all Harry Potter characters and Game of Thrones characters. So I start out as a pygmy puff and I end up as Balerion the Black Dread. And every morning, my automation sends me an email with a workout that's only 15 minutes because that's all I have. And it gives me specific exercises and, and it's silly and fun, but it's genius what it allows you to do because that's a spreadsheet talking to an AI module, talking to an email. And it's that interplay of data between the big bits of tech that you have in your life that allows for almost anything to happen. Like, because that could be your Shopify talking to ChatGPT, talking to Instagram. It could be your Xero accounting talking to a spreadsheet, talking to Slack. It could be anything. And as soon as you've got an AI module in there to interpret the data going between bits of tech, then you have anything. It can be anything. It's wonderful.
I'm just really curious what your current character is.
I am currently moaning metal. Yeah, I'm still on a bit of a low level, but wispy and floating above a toilet. But
where you want to be.
But it gets me doing push-ups in the mornings. Anything that does that is a bonus.
I think what sounds here is there's almost so much stuff that you could do. What I really like about this is kind of you've managed to do it when you went through this big change. You came into it with no coding experience, so you've managed to make it happen on the back foot. And a lot of people listening will still have the team. They'll be on front foot, and they'll have the capability to do it, and they'll probably have less excuses to not do it.
Yeah, agreed.
And it sounds really nice. Like there are ways quite easy that you can educate yourself.
Yeah.
There are ways that you can involve the team. It doesn't mean that you have to rip everything up. It's just really dedicating the time to understand what's possible and then to make sure you're having those conversations. Definitely.
I mean, I think, the one thing I'd say is like sit with your team and do what I did when I realized I was going to have to let everyone go. What are they doing and how long is it taking them? And can it be automated? Because if it can, then it takes something off their plate and then they can do something more useful that only a human can do. And there are still those things that exist. So although I'm slightly worried that we're all going to end up as hairdressers because at this rate, pretty much, anything's going to be AI-able. But it's there's so much that can be done. And, people don't enjoy copying and pasting. Let the computers do that at the very least. And then work up from there. Maybe make it fun. Set a weekly little automation challenge. Find something that's really annoying in your working life and build an automation that does it for you.